So in this episode, the team tries to rescue Gemma as well as trying to convince Cora to turn on Nathaniel. But what this episode really was about the writers trying to convince us fans that it's okay the show's ending. So the reason I think this episode was particularly about that was because we get this big convo between Mac and Daisy at one point where Daisy's bringing up the fact that Enoch had mentioned that this is going to be their last mission together, and we all know this as fans. We knew this the last season. They've done the branding saying it's the final season or the final mission. So we were all ready for this, but obviously the characters in the world don't know that their show is ending and that we'll be following them. So Daisy's obviously a little unsure about what Enoch meant by this. She doesn't think that the team's going to break up. She thinks that they're just going to keep going the way they have been going the last 7 years. And she kind of tells Mac about this, and Mac's like, no, I think Enoch's right. I think we're probably going to be done after this, and that's okay. It's okay that things change and that people move on, and that, you go through different phases in your life, and sometimes the people who you've spent a large chunk of your life with, sometimes you'll have to move on, and that's okay. And I felt that this conversation between Mac and Daisy was very much the writers being like, okay, we got to make the fans a little bit more okay with us fans being Daisy in this conversation, being like, why can't you guys stay together? Why can't you keep making more seasons? Why can't you keep going on adventures? Why can't you keep being the family you've been for so long? And so Daisy's having all these feelings, and us as fans are obviously having these same feelings as we're rolling up to the last few episodes of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And so I think they put in this conversation between Daisy and Mac as a way to kind of have us all get a little talk with have a little talk from our big brother Mac, and him pretty much telling us, yes, life changes and life moves on, and you can't always stay you can't always expect that life is going to completely stay the same. So I thought this was a very kind of nice way of the writers kind of giving a little nod to us fans, being like, yes, we know it's the end. We know you'd like more seasons of the show, but sometimes things have to end, and that's okay. You can still come back and revisit the show whenever you like, and you can still talk to people on the phone. Not that we get to talk to Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. over the phone, but you get the sentiment of we can still revisit the show, and we have other Marvel properties still coming that we can kind of get that same connection to. Hopefully we maybe get a spin-off with one or two of these characters where we can still get that kind of connection in, but that's my hope at least. But I did feel that this was very much around that. This whole episode is very based around that kind of theme of being like, we've got to accept change. We got to accept things end sometimes. So it was bitter because I'm just like, Mac, no, Mac, just want to stay as a family with Daisy. Just keep going on missions, guys. Come on, you guys haven't even done. I can't think of a sci-fi trope that they haven't done, but I did really enjoy that conversation between those two. And another part of this episode that we see kind of really focusing again on change and having to accept change is we see Coulson and May kind of talking about how they're both different than who they were when they first started or when they first met. Now, especially in this season, with May being now an empath, somebody who can sense other people's feelings and take those in, when she's been this whole time somebody who doesn't talk about her feelings, doesn't confront feelings, ignores feelings, pushes them aside, literally punches things instead of confronting her feelings. So them talking about that, and then now Coulson's this kind of computer genius because he can, understand technology and the coding, and how they're both literally different people than they were at the beginning of the show, and that's okay. You sometimes have to accept that things change and that your role changes, and then you have to sometimes just go with that. You can't hold on to the past and hold on to somebody you maybe aren't anymore. So I felt this episode was, again, so that conversation really played into this theme of like, we've got to accept change. You got to accept the end of things. You got to accept that you have to move on. And so I thought this episode was very much based around that whole idea, in my mind at least. I'm not sure, maybe I had a little too much of a latched onto that idea a little too much because we're coming to the end, and I'm always very sad at the end of TV shows because it's it's an ending. We're not the idea that we never get any more of something is always tough for me to accept. But I felt this episode did a really great job of kind of giving us taking the characters and using them in a sense to communicate to the fans that endings are okay, teaching us this lesson that endings are okay, change is okay. You just have to accept it. It's part of life. You have to accept it and keep moving forward. So I did really enjoy this episode for this kind of like really basing off this theme. And then I also liked obviously just more of the character moments we got. Again, this being a little bit more of a Daisy, we got a little more Daisy and Mac in this with the conversation they had. We got Coulson and May spending a lot more time together in this one. So I just really enjoyed this episode overall, just pretty much everything in it. Oh, I also liked that we got the Gemma and Fitz flashbacks, getting little bits and pieces about what they were up to, but leading up to this season in a sense, what led to them to, taking separate paths and her blocking Fitz from her memory. And we end the episode off, spoiler alert, with Gemma's memory of Fitz being completely gone because Nathaniel had dug too deep trying to figure out where Fitz was, and that ends up causing the thing in her head to just make her forget completely. So I'm really curious to see where these next couple episodes go. I'm really been depressed a little bit with this last season not having had Fitz kicking around. I don't know if I maybe missed something about that before the season started, that he wasn't going to be in the season whatsoever. Maybe maybe they intentionally didn't mention that, but I'm a little bit disappointed this is the last season of S.H.I.E.L.D. and we didn't get Fitz, one of the characters who was there from the very beginning. Obviously, we've had this big tie to him. It feels almost like he's been written out of the show a little bit because they've done it in a very similar way to what you do when an actor decides to leave a show, but you can't completely ignore that. Kind of like with 2.5 Men, when they killed off Charlie Sheen's character, and they kind of keep referring to him. They literally kill him off in that, but similar in this that they kind of referring to but not completely addressing it. So I'm not really sure where that's going to go, but I'm curious to find out. But yes, again, so this episode I really enjoyed, and I'm curious to see where these last few episodes go, and I'm trying to do my best to accept that we're coming to the end and just having to be, like Max said, you have to accept change and keep moving forward. So that's all my thoughts on the latest episode of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Be sure to let me know in the comments what you thought about this episode. Thanks again for joining me today. Sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and have a good one.